first slide, what we see here is just our cool new barcode to link you to our LinkedIn site. What's great there is there's a whole bunch of very informational articles all about life sciences challenges. You're welcome to visit us at LinkedIn and just search under compliance team or scan that barcode. And also feel free to visit us at complianceteamllc.com. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we are compliance and regulatory experts. We've been helping companies for about 20 years solve any challenges regarding, dealing with the FDA, the specific regulations, specifically commissioning services, quality systems, auditing, gap assessments, things all revolving around helping to get your medical devices and your drugs manufactured in a safe and compliant way. And sometimes it's just for subject matter expertise, and sometimes it's just because there's not enough people to do the work and you have a deadline and you need an extra set of hands. So feel free to ask us to help out so we can meet those deadlines with you. Advance the slide, please. Just some general information. We will be taking questions throughout this webinar through the Q&A button at the top of the screen. Now, we will answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. Anything that is left over, we will reply via email. If you have a really tricky question, we may have to answer that via email rather than address it here on the call. But all of that, will be managed one way or another. I am delighted to introduce her to you. She's going to be handling really all the expertise and letting you know what's going on with the 483s. She has multiple designations and certifications. We're very lucky to have her, and really delighted that we're all getting together here today to talk about some very, very interesting data and information. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over to you, Regina.
We're going to be covering pharmaceuticals and medical devices 483s for this presentation. If you need program data for other areas such as dietary supplements or biologics, let us know and we can help you. We're going to be doing a comparative analysis of the FDA 483s against historical data, and this is the first time that we're able to give you a full 10-year outlook, so we can see how the 483s have changed over a decade. We're also going to be looking at the rates of 483s as much as looking at the 483s themselves, because we can see that historical changes have actually changed how many 483s get cited. And hopefully by seeing all these rankings and seeing how things are trending, you'll be able to take that knowledge back to your jobs and be able to identify the high priority actions for your organization. It's nearing springtime here in Chicago, so nice to have a little gardening imagery here. But we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of this webinar. And it's kind of an eye chart here, but the things we want to focus on in this let's see, is we're looking at the trends over time on the number of 483s that have been assigned. So if we look at, boy, what is this? Oh boy, I'm sorry, I did not mean to do that. Let's go back here. So we just focus on the drugs and devices, and you can see that we had, a really peak year in assigning 483s in 2017 for whatever reason. But in 2023, we reached another peak again. And notice that those peaks happened after there was, low activity. So it's possible that those are situations where the FDA is like, getting their footing again after a lull. And for instance, in 2017, that was the time that they did program realignment. So we can see that they were recalibrating maybe in 2016 and 2017. They were doing the program realignment. That was a time when they were training lots of inspectors, retraining them or making them realign. So they probably were taking a lot of people on inspections in order to train them. And so you're going to see a lot more 483s then. Whereas in 2023, we're coming off the pandemic. The FDA had low activity in 2020, 2021, starting to ramp up in 2022. In 2023, they were finally able to do full inspections in force. So you're going to see high numbers again there where they're trying to get rid of that backlog. Another thing you can see is at the very bottom of the chart, they have a new program in Part 11. So now the FDA is starting to do specific inspections for Part 11 or for the Part 11 program area. They probably decided that they wanted to get some computer system experts to do some data integrity inspections for companies where they felt like there might be a situation there that looked questionable as far as their computerized data. So they created this new system. And overall inspection trends actually in many ways looks pretty good for industry, because if you look at historically, so these different designations, NAI means no action indicated. That means that the FDA left the inspection with 0 483s being cited. So you can see the vast majority of firms got an FDA inspection and did not receive any 483s. The second category, that yellow line, is VAI, which stands for voluntary action indicated. It means that the FDA said, you have some 483s, but we do not believe that there's any public health risk. And so you can see that, you got 12,000 or so no action indicated, and about, almost 5,000, not quite 5,000, that had a voluntary action indicated, meaning that there was at least one 483 cited, but the FDA did not believe that there was a public health risk. OAI is the most serious violations. Those are official action indicated. That means you're probably getting a warning letter or worse. And you can see that last year there were 360 inspections that resulted in an official action indicated, meaning a warning letter or worse was required. So what are the trends? Well, it looks like, well, first of all, the fewer firms that get looked at get warning letters. So you can see that dip there in 2020 and 2021 pandemic. Well, the FDA was not out there doing inspections. They were at risk for their own public health as well, and people were doing more work from home, and that means fewer inspections. So you're going to see a dip there, and then it came back up, but it looks relatively good, because when they started doing more inspections, you could see that they at least were finding that a lot of those firms were still in the FDA's good graces. But here's a thing that we're seeing here is that the FDA last year, because of their because they probably, this whole reorganization was spurred by the pandemic, they stopped doing some calculations for me that I used to be able to just download a lot of this data and use it right away. And it made my job a little more difficult because I had to go take the FDA's raw data and crunch it for you for the webinar this year, as opposed to last year where it was already there. So they decommissioned that inspection classification database. So I had to go grab the data myself. So you guys are getting extra attention this year because I did some of this work that the FDA was doing for me in the past. And so here we go with our top 10, starting with pharmaceuticals. Again, we're only doing pharmaceuticals and devices. And if you want to do a different program area, I can certainly help you, but that's going to be offline. So tied for 10th place or 11th place, as you might call it, we have 2 pharmaceutical findings. The quality control unit is either absent or lacks authority, and the stability program is absent or not documented. Then number 9, testing and acceptance of incoming components is absent or poorly documented. So basically incoming quality controls. Cleaning of the utensils or cleaning, which also includes cleaning validation. So the FDA can come in and let's say they go do a walk through the plant and then they see that there's some crud that's junked on some, like an impeller in a mixer. They might ask you, well, is this a clean or dirty? And if it's clearly marked clean, okay, may I see your cleaning validation? If they see that there's no cleaning validation, then that's a finding. So cleaning not only includes visual sight of dirt on a cleaning utensil, but also would say you didn't validate it, so therefore we don't know if it's clean enough. The next one is validation. 7 is definitely like your IQ, OQs, basically saying, did you verify that the equipment actually is suitable for its intended use? The next one, these are for microbial failures. So if you're, especially if you're saying that your product is sterile, it's supposed to be like an IV bag of something, an injection of something. If you're either not following your procedure for keeping those drugs free from contamination, or you don't have a procedure, or it's an inadequate procedure, that's what this finding is for. The next one is for laboratory controls. This has to do with, first of all, data integrity. So your laboratory controls include your standards that you use, your sampling plans, your test procedures that make sure that you don't mix up your samples or you are mixing up your standards. So, of course, if you're going to say that this drug product meets its quality criteria, you're going to have to verify that you haven't done anything that messes with that data. And then the last one is computerized systems. Now remember, this is 211.68. If they see that there's a problem with 211.160 or 211.68, they might send in a separate data integrity audit altogether. Because if they see that there's something a little off here, that might require another inspection for part 11. Number 3, production and process controls. So that means making sure that you are you have procedures that ensure that nothing is going to go wrong when you do the manufacturing. This is a big one. This is pharmaceutical CAPA. Pharmaceuticals don't have a requirement for CAPA, but basically what they're saying is if anything's kind of discrepant, it doesn't look right, whether it fails or not, if it doesn't look consistent to what your batches have been in the past, you need to do some kind of an investigation to find out why things look funky. And so the FDA can get you on okay, let's look at these results. Let's look at the control chart here. Wait, this one's an outlier. Did you investigate why that's an outlier? Yes, it met its criteria, but it's an outlier on a control chart. Did you investigate why? And then number 1 is that the responsibilities or procedures for the quality control unit are either not written or they're not fully followed. So what's nice about using the top 10 as a gauge is that if you just go against the top 3, these 3 citations, you have eliminated 25, closely a quarter of your risk, 22% of your risk. If you've gone a little bit deeper to the top 10, you've almost eliminated half of your risk of a 483 finding. So if you cover these top 10, going by the Pareto principle, the vital few versus the trivial many. So we're going to see a similar trend when we go into devices. But first, let's go into the comments on the 211. So this 211.22 on the quality unit, it's just been there. It has been there for 9 years, and we all see the 1011 spot. Quality unit is very essential for pharmaceuticals. You need somebody there who has the ability to say, no, we are not going to ship this product. It does not meet the quality criteria. If that quality unit is being countermanded by management, or the quality unit's power is stripped from them, or they wrote the procedures purposefully vague so that the quality unit doesn't have the power that they should have to say no, the FDA is going to find that as an observation. Investigation of discrepancies has been in the number 2 or 3 spot for the last 10 years. It's not going anywhere. If something looks wrong, you need to investigate it and find out why. Data integrity is an important, of course, I already said, we also have a new Part 11 program area. That's how important the FDA thinks that data integrity is. And then we do see some cleanliness issues and emphasis on QC lab operations. It's important. So now we go into devices. So at the number 10 spot, we have procedures for design changes not adequately established. So we're talking about here about design control, and we're talking about post-release design control, meaning your design control does not die after you release the product. When you make design changes, you need to properly document those and do proper change control for that. Not just design control is not just an upfront thing. And then tied for 9 or 8, depending on your point of view, 8.5. We have CAPAs. CAPA results and activities were not adequately documented. For this one, I always recommend that you don't just open a CAPA and then close it when you finally resolve it. The CAPA file is a living document. It should be updated on a regular basis as you do new investigation actions, as you do more corrective actions. So always consider it a living file and go back to it and revisit it on a regular basis. I recommend weekly or at least bi-weekly. And then procedures for training and identifying training needs have not been, and I have in here brackets, adequately established. But basically the FDA is saying that if you didn't fully do it, it's not done. It's not done. So it's not really established. If you have a training procedure, but it's not implemented, that's not adequately established. If you have a training procedure, but it's not effective, then it's not adequately established. That's what the point of this is. Number 7 is about process validation. You need to have process validation to verify that your essential processes and methods are effectively validated. And that means that if after you've validated a process, you find that it fails, well, then you need to go back into the CAPA process and find out why and actually establish a change control that might involve a design change. You got to revisit all that. Procedures to ensure that purchasing controls are conformed to. Again, you can purchase something, you need to have specified requirements for what that purchased material is or the purchasing supplier requirements and implement that. And if you find that there's a reason why a certain supplier or a certain material doesn't need to go through all those channels, then there should be in your procedure an explanation for that process. For instance, there's a risk-based scale on how your supplier should conform, but it can't just be by a deviation or some kind of waiver. There needs to be a process in there. Procedures for control of non-conforming product were either not adequately documented or followed. That means if a product is not conforming, that you are following a process to effectively segregate that material. And then device history record, it was inadequately established and maintained. Device history record, of course, means the record of the manufacturing of the material. So if we just go with these 4 through 10, we've gotten a quarter of the observations that the FDA finds for about, which is pretty significant. And then here for the top 3, it's another quarter of the findings. The first one, the procedures for quality audits were not adequately established. Procedures for receiving, reviewing, and evaluating complaints were not established. And the procedures for CAPA not established. Now, I think it's very interesting here because what we had for many, many years was the corresponding thing to 820.198, which was 803. 803 had the requirement that for 803 was the requirement for medical device reports, which of course complaints feed into medical device reports. Somebody complains that a patient was harmed, you have to do a report. But the nice thing here is that we did not see that. Now, does that mean that we're getting any better? I don't know. 803.17, are we getting better, or is that a change of focus? I'm going to posit that they just decided to look at complaints a little bit harder. But I think that medical device reports we've maybe gotten a little bit better at it as we learned that, hey, this is something that actually the FDA looks at. I'm not sure, but that's my opinion. Complaint procedures, still important though. CAPA, which is mentioned twice in the top 10, it's still mentioned twice in the top 10. And quality audits is a new top 10. To me, that means that the FDA is saying, hey, how good are you as a company at monitoring your own non-conformities? We're going to have CAPA. CAPA is part of monitoring that non-conformities, but how much are you auditing yourselves to make sure that you're conforming? That's my opinion. So we're going to find out now with a trend line analysis, my own homegrown method trend line analysis of whether the FDA has a new focus. So here we go. Here in the pharma focus, and now this looks like an eye chart, and let me first explain some things here. So let me see if I can get this highlighter thing going. Highlighter. So this area here, with this program alignment, all these crisscrosses here. So like I said, 2017 was that year of where they did program alignment. And you saw that during that period, they had an improved or increased number of inspections. So they were training people on how to do an inspection. And of course, you would expect that during that time, you might see that people are finding things that weren't normal because we're talking about a bunch of inspectors that were doing training. So these crisscrosses basically mean that things were coming off the top 10 and new things were coming on the top 10. And that's because we were talking about an influx of new auditors who were still kind of getting their feet wet during 2017. And then you'll see that there's a number of crisscrosses here, pandemic wise. So we kind of realized there that those were anomalous events, okay? So that, but we can see some things that are constant. The quality unit has always been a top priority. This, and then we can kind of see here that lab controls, it's started out as number 2, and it ended up here like at number 5. So does that mean we're getting better? Maybe. Or maybe that means that a lot of those lab controls have now gone off into that program area that's now called Part 11. But we're seeing that there's it's slightly gone down. Okay, next program area, investigations. Investigations has stayed at number 2 or 3 through the whole time and is now at number 2. So we know that the FDA places a high priority on investigation, what we normally call CAPA. The next program area, production and process controls, was at 4 and now is at 3. Again, very high priority with the FDA and really has not changed over time. Now, here's an interesting one. Cleaning. This is that cleaning of equipment and utensils. It started out in 2014 at like 5th place. And now it's at 8th place. So it's still a priority with the FDA and is ranked somewhere in the middle. So we want to keep our eyes on that. So these are just some 10-year history changes in time that might have occurred. Okay, so now we're going to go into devices. And in devices, again, we see this same thing, this muddle here, sandwiching 2017 while everybody's getting trained in program realignment. And we see this muddle here between 2022 and 2023 because of the pandemic, where honestly, investigations or, audits weren't happening on site. But here's some interesting trends here. CAPA procedures has always been in the number 1 spot over the past 10 years. If you don't have good CAPA procedures, you're probably not going to do very well. But here's the interesting one, complaint procedures. Last year, complaint procedures came off the top 10. And at the time it was like, wow, now it's at 11. But at that time, it was kind of like, wow, is that because the FDA is not looking deeper at it? Maybe, because remember this year, we didn't have MDR procedures appearing in the top 10. So I'm not saying to stop investigating your complaints, and I'm not telling you that your MDRs are doing fine, but maybe it just means that we as an industry are getting better at it. Purchasing controls. So purchasing controls, it was at number 3. It's now, we kind of follow the trend line, and it's now at like number 6. Is the FDA's focus changing? Maybe over a decade it could have changed. Maybe there were things that were more important than to purchasing controls, such as, I don't know, production and process controls and CAPA. But again, CAPA started here at number 6, and now it's like tied for 8 and 9. CAPA documentation. Remember, CAPA procedures, number 1. So CAPA is important because it appears twice. It's just that, are they citing 820.100A or 820.100B? Not a big deal. And then here's the really surprising one. Here we have quality audits at number 9. It's kind of gone all over the place, right? But we end up, where was that? We end up at 3 this year. So that one I would say is a pretty high priority. I mean, we want to consider that. So just food for thought. The FDA's focus does kind of change over time, but we are always going to be looking at CAPA and complaints. Interesting that now one year they're looking at MDRs, the next year they're looking at complaint procedures. Be mindful, it's not going away. And purchasing controls is, I don't know, it needs to be there, but it's important. So now we're going to kind of change our focus. The FDA has changed their focus. Now we're going to change our focus here, and that is warning letters. So the reason why I put this 262 of 3,438 records found. So that's the number of warning letters, we filtered down. So we're looking at just these 262 warning letters. And I'm not seeing anything remarkable for pharmaceuticals or medical devices in them. Much of the warning letters that I'm seeing out there have to do with things like unapproved products or failure to register. Not a GMP violation, but these are companies that may not have actually recognized that they even had a product that was regulated by the FDA and didn't even know that they had to go register their site or, get a 510K or NDA. We're talking about tobacco products violations. Misbranding a product, which is a labeling problem, saying that it does something that it shouldn't, or there's no clinical data or whatever. A clinical investigation violation. So we see a lot of these clinical investigation violations having to do with a lot of times clinical investigators aren't doing their jobs, or they don't, if they're clinical investigators, but they're not properly trained. So they don't follow the protocol as written. And of course that has to happen. And just overall manufacturer ignorance. So when we say that, I mean, the warning letters are public health problems that are serious. And these, of course, are the ones that also got into that OAI category that we're talking about earlier, the official action indicated. So it takes a lot to get a warning letter. That being said, you want to do what you're doing properly. If you did get a warning letter, you'll see that the verbiage in there follows kind of a pattern. Unusually, it says is, you had a violation. There was an audit that took place in your site. You gave us a response, and your response is inadequate. So why is the response inadequate? Because when you answer to a violation, you need to discuss the extent of the problem. You can't just dismiss it. You have to really get in there. You have to provide evidence that the fix addresses the problem, and determine whether recalls were warranted. Because if you're getting a warning letter, that's the FDA's cue that they believe that the problem is a threat to public health. If they didn't write that letter, that if they wouldn't have written that letter if they didn't believe that were true. So unlike when you're in the audit situation where you're supposed to say as little as possible, the warning letters are the opportunity to really open up and give them the full answer. It's like, when you're taking an essay test and you got to give the full answer. So what are the things you got to look? Is you got to look at the past, you got to look at the present, you got to look at the future. Okay, the past questions. How did I fix the past wrongs? Was the past wrong an issue? So let me give you an example of one that we did. Is we went back and let's say the FDA said you didn't follow proper production and process controls for your product. Okay, Let's go back. What were our complaints? Did any of our complaints purport that there were any problems? What were all of our test results? Did any of our test results suggest that there was contamination of the product? Did we, so you go back in the past, and how are we going to remediate any past? Are there any recalls that we had to do? Did we do recalls? Were they not necessary? What's the data that substantiates that a recall was not necessary? So past. Now, present, what am I doing right now? What is my containment action, which is different than your corrective action? Meaning, what am I doing right now to make sure that the product that I have in-house right now, or the products that's in the customer hands right now, doesn't present a threat to public health? What did I do right now? Did I have to retrain people? Include the training records for those people if you retrained them. Include the new procedure that you made them train on. Those things should be part of your response. And then the future is, what commitments have you made? What is your CAPA number? What are the corrective actions that are in that CAPA? What is the timing of that CAPA? How are you going to ensure that CAPA is effective? And what are you going to do if it isn't effective? All these things need to be answered in your 483 response. If you're not giving enough information, the FDA will come back and say your response is inadequate. So give the full answer, give a holistic answer. What an FDA inspector said recently in one of our a webinar I attended of his. So that's where we are for our top 10 483 presentation. We have about 7 minutes here until the top of the hour to answer questions.
And Regina, what we'll do is any questions we can't get to, folks, we will answer, but keep in mind, you can always send us a message at solutions@complianceteamllc.com. We're happy to help you later.
Oh, here we go again.
And we can go ahead and Pat, if you want to start handling some of those questions, let's get through them in the couple minutes that we have left.
Sure. So I'd like to start with one of the questions that came in during the presentation.
Okay.
It's on complaints trends of the FDA. This is from Jose. What have they been finding more frequently? Lack of procedures or vagueness in the procedures regarding their complaints program? It's great question.
Yeah. So the FDA doesn't parse that out. Basically, if the procedure is vague, then it will say that the procedure is inadequately implemented. Okay, so they don't really say that, but I think it's not vagueness that the problem really is going to. It's if the procedure is written in such a way that it drives poor decision making. Okay, so you didn't make the right decision based on this complaint. Okay, so how does the FDA normally investigate complaints? Usually they will ask you to provide the complaints in some searchable format, such as an Excel spreadsheet. They'll say, just download all your complaint information into a spreadsheet and just let us search it. So now what are they looking for? Well, they're going to be looking for anything that suggests that the product was not working as indicated. They're going to be looking for any instances where there might have been a medical device report that should appear in MedWatch that wasn't there. They're going to look for key words like malfunction, death, injury, harm, and try to infer based on that whether you made the correct decision in how you're following up with that complaint, whether there's a CAPA associated with the complaint or other medical device report or some other adverse event reporting evaluation tool applied. If your procedure doesn't drive the individual who's doing your complaint handling to perform those actions, whether it's vague or not. So if it's vaguely worded and your complaint handling person did the right thing, they're probably not going to find anything. But if the procedure doesn't prompt the correct actions that the FDA is looking forward to seeing, then you're going to be cited. I hope that answers the question. But they don't parse it out that way. They don't say for this one it was because of this and that one because this person was too vague. And even if it is vague, it's about what did the complaint handler do. Is there another question that came in? I have a couple here that came in before the presentation started. Do you want me to go with those, or are the other ones in the chat?
Actually, Regina, I do have one more question regarding attendance certificates, but we can answer that offline if you want to.
Yeah,
go for the ones that came in, because I think they're more germane to the content.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
So just to answer that thing about the certificates, what we'll do is when we send out the presentation after the webinar, we can also send out a notification that you can use that for some kind of training units. And I'll put out something because I did recently present this to my ASQ section, and we did award continuing education credits for that. So I'll put something in there similar to that. So another question I got was, how much time does the FDA give for you to remediate a 483? And that is kind of a big, it depends. What does it depend on? It depends on how much time it's going to take to remediate it, how much you've already accomplished. So you might, for instance, you might already have a containment action, which then might give you a little more time to do the full remediation. Basically, when you respond to a 483, you should also be providing the FDA with some sort of timetable on how long you expect it to take to remediate. And it needs to be reasonable. It needs to be based on data and content and the complexity of the finding and the complexity for fixing it. So as long as you're making a SMART goal, specific, measurable, time bound, and you stick to that time frame. And you may also put in your 483 response a timetable for how frequently you're going to provide updates to the FDA on the actions. You are given the leeway to make the corrections in the time frame that makes sense based on the finding. I know it's vague, but it has to be reasonable. It can't be, you can't give yourself 5 years. You have to give yourself a reasonable time frame. Any other questions that have come in before I give you another one that came in before the webinar?
Actually, Regina, no, you can continue with the other ones.
And the other question that came in before the webinar was, can the FDA fine a facility for not remediating a 483? And the answer is yes, but the FDA normally only imposes fines when you get into that official action indicated space, the OAIs. And that's when you've gone beyond having a 483, you've gone beyond having a warning letter. Now the FDA is going to take your company to court and they're imposing a consent decree. And usually that involves some kind of monetary penalties for every day not remediated. So these are for the serious findings of ongoing problems, the FDA sees that you are a threat to public health, they usually cut off all but your most essential products to ensure the safety of public health. And then say on top of that, not only are you not allowed to sell half of your products that really aren't essential for public health or won't create a drug shortage or whatever, we're also going to fine you a large amount. Sometimes this can put a company out of business, just for the fact that you are a bad actor. Not a typical thing to happen, but it is a consequence that could occur with noncompliance. And now we're past the hour. If there are no other questions, I will close the call. And a very good and happy Valentine's to all of you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.